Välkommen och god dag allesammans, and welcome back to the series on my channel where we use translations, academic interpretations, and theories about what the Norse gods and deities actually mean. When we do this, we see that the myths are not just fairy tales meant for kids, but they are things to symbolize different aspects of nature and the cosmos. And today, we are looking at Bölþorn, the evil giant father of Bestla, so the maternal grandfather of Odin. So at the beginning of the universe, the story goes, when there was nothing else besides the giant Ymir, then this hermaphrodite giant alone gave birth to a race of giants. Then Bölþorn was eventually born, and he gave birth to a giantess called Bestla, and she banged a deity named Borr, and they gave birth to Odin, and all the gods just expanded from there in one big incest pool. Did our ancestors believe in all this nonsense? Well, let's take a look. As usual, we will look at the translation and etymology of the word first. So Bölþorn is pretty easy. It just means evil thorn, pretty much. It can also mean miserable thorn. Some people also translate it to Bölþor. Hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to it, like evil Thor, or miserable Thor, like the god Thor. So that's about it for the etymology. That's a really easy one. Let's look at the attestations. We only see Bölþorn twice in all of the sources from ancient times. We see him once in the Poetic Edda, and that's in Audhumbla. And here it just says that Odin learned the 9 magic songs from the famous son of Bölþorn. So when Odin got a drink of the precious mead, we all know that story. So in here, this is probably referring to Ymir that Odin is talking about, which would make Bölþorn the father of Bestla and Ymir. And Ymir, actually, in that case, is Odin's uncle. So remember here, the name is listed as Bölþor in Audhumbla. The other mention of him comes in the Prose Edda in the section Gilfangning. And here it just simply mentions that Bölþorn is giant or Jotun and Bestla's father. So as you can see here, it shows the full Bölþorn written version in the Prose Edda. So that's about it. There's really no other mention of Bölþorn in all the ancient sources, so we don't have much information to go on besides the fact that he is probably Mimir's father, and he's also Bestla's father, being Odin's grandfather. So let's look at some of the theories as to what he represents. So the most popular theory that many scholars argue for is that Bölþorn embodies the traditional relationship with the maternal uncle, which is an important relationship in many Germanic myths and legends. Even an old Icelandic proverb says that men usually turn out like their maternal uncle. So I don't know if I like that theory so much. I mean, Bölþorn is not Odin's uncle, it's his grandfather on his mother's side, but I haven't read all those full academic papers on that, just some summaries, so if anyone has, they can elaborate more on that in the comments below. Another theory that I have seen on Bölþorn is that he represents the genetic mass that there was before life, the DNA in whatever bacteria or fungus or plants or animals that was there before humans, and then Bestla represents the best of that genetic material that survived, and that is what gave life to humans and how we keep developing. So that one's pretty cool. I've heard that one. I have a theory on this as well, and I think it makes the most sense. If you haven't watched my videos on Audhumbla, Buri, Borr, Bestla, do that, because I tell about the translation and background on those two. Those videos are in the link in the description, but basically, really quickly, Audhumbla represents the domesticated cattle that humans kept during the last ice age. So as they started to lick the ice and dig for the grass underneath the ice and the glaciers, they started to melt, uncovering the land. Now Buri, the giant who was under the ice in the myths, represents this land that was underneath the ice right at the last ice age. And then Buri gives birth to Borr, which is Odin's father. And Borr represents that land, but it represents the fertile, developed land that started to develop after the glaciers receded. And then Borr marries Bestla, and Bestla is the bark or the bast, directly translated. That's what her name is. So she is the cells that make the plants complete on the outer membrane so that they can grow. So what could Bestla's father be? What type of entity comes before the bast, that plant fiber? Well, it maybe could be some sort of DNA or genetic material. So before any life exists, there needs to be some sort of DNA, and then from that, combined with a whole bunch of other things, life can be created. It's the same thing for humans, plants, animals, fungus, whatever. And this makes some sense. Bölþorn is one of the absolute oldest giants. Most of the experts will agree that Ymir, the first being, represents sound, and then his descendants are Audhumbla, who represents rock or mineral matter, Ymir, who represents energy, and then Ymir, who represents the first soil or seeds. Then after that, after Ymir, would be the generation in the giants of when Bölþorn would be born. Bölþorn may represent some kind of DNA or genetic material, so that life could be born after that. So guys, I'm not saying that our primitive ancestors had any knowledge of DNA or genetic material like this. They absolutely did not. But they did have knowledge of something similar to that. They didn't really have any microscopes or testing kits or any scientific things like that. All they had was their eyes and their ears and their memories and stories. And their logic, and they would see how things happened in the world, and they would see how they developed, and they would try to make sense of it all this way. So it's very possible that they saw things grow and how life was created, and that they would assume that there was some sort of thing that was the original force behind creating life. That's why some of these words are so hard for us to understand in modern times. So our word for that entity that is there before life is created, that's called DNA or genetic material. Our ancient ancestors' word for it could have been Bölþorn, or Böl, meaning evil Thor. Like I said, like it was originally said in Audhumbla, it was Bölþorn, so directly translated it might mean evil Thor or miserable Thor. And as most of you know, I hope, Thor in the myths basically represents the life force in all things. That's a basic summary of Thor, but I'll go into much more detail about him in another video. So Bölþorn, directly translated, could be evil life force or miserable life force, something like that. And a possible interpretation of that is maybe that the DNA or genetic material was evil or miserable before life was brought to it. And then when it was able to develop into life and something is born, it receives a spirit. It receives a spirit and Ymir, if it's a plant, for example. If it was a human, it would also receive soul and thoughts and inspiration. See my video about Draupnir and the 9 rings and the 9 elements of the human soul. That life force, when it's born, is no longer evil or miserable. Then it becomes Thor. So that's just an idea. That's my own thoughts, but there are some others coming up with similar theories. Let me know what you guys think. That's why I make these videos. I don't have all the answers and the best theories. Nobody does. But if we can get more people with great minds on it like yourself, thinking about these things too, then we can come up with the best theories and discover the lost beliefs of our people. So that's about it for this video. Vi ses nästa gång.